Hey guys, what's up? It's FilterSC here, and I'm back for episode number 6 of my new Bronze to Masters series. This one's all about your mentality, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about playing with no fear, so that we're not making a ton of adjustments that are just going to slow us down and screw us up in the long run. We're going to talk about why that's bad, and why it really affects your game, without you necessarily knowing that it's causing you serious issues when you're trying to play. So the first thing is, what causes fear? Well, fear when you play is caused by recent games. Maybe you just recently lost to some guy that floated in like 3 oracles. Maybe you just lost to a bunch of Dark Templar. Maybe you're getting wrecked by Cloak Banshee consistently. Or maybe it's just Mass Hellion that's kind of screwing you up and killing you when a whole bunch of Hellions come in and just kind of roast your Marines that are sitting at your natural. And it's important to understand the difference between playing without fear or just doing a build that's bad, right? In the current meta, relying on a ton of heavy early on Marines is pretty tough because any of those Mass Hellion builds are usually just going to kill you outright unless you wall your front. So it's not necessarily a fear thing in that situation, it's just doing an antiquated build that doesn't quite fit the meta. But when you keep dying to Dark Templar over and over, so you're getting a blind missile turret at like 5 minutes and that kind of stuff, that's really going to slow you down in the long run. And maybe you died to a really fast Dark Templar rush in the last game. And just for the record, when Protoss rushes Dark Templar, they don't come till about 6:45. So getting a missile turret up at like 5 minutes isn't going to do anything for you. And the other thing that can cause fear is just cutting too many corners. So when you play and you're cutting all these corners, you're not getting enough units early, you're kind of rushing to get your build done, and you're skipping units, which I see quite often. I see players that will lose to things like, a really poorly executed 4-gate or whatever it is, because they're just cutting too many corners, they're not getting the units that they need. And in that case, they're going to start adding on a bunch of bunkers, and they're going to have even less units, and the problem is just going to keep snowballing itself. So it's important to keep that in mind as we move forward through this episode. It's also worth noting that in the game in the background, I play against a Protoss player that goes for Oracles and a Dark Templar, and all he does is Chrono Boost probes, and he puts up nothing defensively. So he just goes for this huge amount of, essentially, Protoss stuff, if you want to call it that. This is Protoss at the most Protoss-y they can get, and I end up defending and deflecting everything really well, despite not even really being able to scout much of it, and at the same time having a really hard time dealing with the fact that he gets a fast 3 base with a better economy than I have. But I really try to play without fear and be as aggressive as I can in terms of my upgrades and stuff like that. If I had have sat there building all these defenses and expanding really slowly and that kind of stuff, I would have just got smoked. But I was able to punish this guy because his upgrades were kind of slow, and the reason for that was because he went for all this other crazy tech, and then he didn't really control his army properly. He had too many stalkers, and he just walked into this massive concave, and I was able to light him up and win the game. But if I hadn't have played the way that I did, and I played with a whole bunch of fear, and I slowed myself down by 1, 2, 3 minutes, he would have crushed me because he was going for a triple forge play, which sounds ridiculous, but it just kind of is what it is, right? So let's talk about why is fear bad. There's a couple ways that fear can really mess you up when you're scared of what your opponent is doing or what he can be doing, and the easiest way to look at that is overlapping defenses, right? So a really good example of that is Cloak Banshee. Let's say your typical TBT opener, you decide you're going to open up with a Raven and a Viking, then you're going to get a second Viking, and that's going to keep you safe against Banshees. But after you see the Banshee, or maybe you're just scared of him in general, you're like, oh, so you start adding on 3 missile turrets so you can cover your production and your bases and all that. And essentially what you've done is defend against the same thing twice, so when he does that follow-up tank push, you just die because you've invested so much in this anti-Banshee defense that, yeah, his Banshee is never going to do any damage to you, but it probably would have been better if it had have got 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 worker kills based on how much static defense you threw up and how much slower the rest of your build is, right? You throw up 2 missile turrets, that's a barracks that you don't have, that's going to take even longer to finally get and build up. And it really does add up and cause a lot of problems as the game starts to go on when you're scared of all these things and you're throwing up all this static defense. You know what? It's okay to get the Raven and the couple of Vikings, and then when you scout the Banshee and you're worried about, him possibly making a second Banshee, you just throw a missile turret at your main or maybe in your natural, and then you can use the Viking and the Raven to defend elsewhere while the missile turret kind of takes care of your main base, right? You don't necessarily need to worry about having missile turrets all over the place in that particular situation, and you're not overlapping your defense. It's the same thing with Dark Templar, right? If the guy is making Dark Templar, and you know this and you scout it, just get a missile turret up at the front and then maybe save 1 or 2 scans, and that's it. You don't need to add millions of missile turrets everywhere and save your scans for the rest of eternity, because you need to get those mules down, you need to get that money, you can't slow yourself down too much. If you save up 4 scans, you're essentially throwing away 1,200 minerals that you're not going to have in the next 60 seconds, on top of the fact that you're investing in all these extra turrets because you're worried about maybe Dark Templar getting dropped in the back of your base or something, right? You don't need to add a lot of static D when you're worried about these things. It's really important not to be afraid of what your opponent can do. Another example would be Widow Mines if you're a Protoss player. Yeah, it sucks when Widow Mines get into your mineral line, but all that means is you just need to keep an observer at home and be ready for it. In the case of maybe you're going for like a big charge lot build, then you add a cannon in each mineral line, and that's about it. But you don't need to add cannons in both mineral lines, cannons to stop the drop from coming in the first place. You don't need to add like 18 observers spread out all over the place because you're so scared of this Widow Mine. By the time you do that, you're just going to die to the Terran straight up push, right? It's really important not to overlap your defenses. Make your decision on how you're going to defend something after you scout it, and then be okay. And if you're overlapping your defense like crazy because you just hate Widow Mines, you're in all kinds of bad shape, because if the Terran doesn't go for a Widow Mine drop, everything else he does is going to be a lot faster, and you're just going to get wrecked by any kind of standard timing push. So you have to be really careful when you start talking about overlapping defenses, because it will slow your build down because you've made all these little adjustments that you think you have to make, and it's just going to make sure that you are going to lose because you're not going to ever have anything you need to deflect a regular, normal attack, right? And you'll see pros all the time cut all these corners to try to defend at a very thin rate, and it feels awkward when you do it, but you really have to get used to defending against these attacks with very thin amounts of defense. It's really easy to deflect an attack if you know it's coming, but it's going to be even harder to finish off the game and get the win. It's very easy to fall into a situation where you just crush the cheese, or you crush whatever kind of early aggression is coming at you, but then you have no way to punish it and you have no way to follow it up, and the other guy is miles ahead of you because you've invested so much in your defense. It's the worst thing you can do in your play, so you have to be very, very careful about adding adjustments. And over time, you're going to get better, and you're going to start using your micro to defend these things. It's important to understand that too. Make sure you're not relying so much on all these extra defensive procedures to defend against this Banshee. Maybe you feel like your micro sucks, and you can't handle that Banshee with just a Viking and a Raven. Well, guess what? Maybe the Viking and the Raven build's not for you. Or even better, maybe you need to challenge yourself to start defending against Cloak Banshees by using just that Raven and Viking. I've even done that in my own TBT. I've been playing a very thin TBT against Cloak Banshee, even though it's such a common build, and I'm okay with losing a few workers every now and then because I don't defend it with any kind of optimal defense, right? It's really important to not be scared when you're playing the game, and to make sure that you don't add in all these extra adjustments, and you get used to playing with thin defenses, because if you're playing with thin defenses, that means your overall macro and your overall build is going to be a lot better. And the fact that that guy's invested in all this tech that's designed to harass you, when you finally do deflect that attack, you're going to be able to go back and just shove it right in his face and pick up the win like the champion you are, or at least the champion you hopefully are. And the last thing we're going to talk about for the end of this video is, when you talk about playing without fear, what you really want to make sure you do is you only play against what you can see. So that means whatever you scouted of your opponent and whatever you've seen that he has is what you play against, right? If you haven't seen Cloak Banshee, if you haven't seen, all the signs that lead to him going for that, or if you haven't seen him going for Dark Templar, or if you're a Zerg player and you don't see a starport in your opponent's base and it just looks like, a regular Hellion 3cc style build, then don't worry about it. You don't need to build a ton of Spore Crawlers and get 18 Queens because you're worried about it. It's really important to only play against what you can see, because as soon as you start trying to defend for everything that can happen, you're going to lose so many games because you just don't have anything, right? You're going to lose to regular timing attacks, you're going to lose to macro games, and it's just going to be a complete mess. And the other reason this is really important, and I want everybody that feels like they're stuck in a league to listen to this and understand it, is you might be a diamond level player, you might have diamond level macro, but at the end of the day, you're so scared of what your opponent can do that you put in all these anti-cheese defenses and you never lose to the initial cheese, but you're in Platinum League or you're in Gold League, even though you should be in Diamond, because you're playing scared out of your skull in every single game. That is one of the most important things that you can pick up from this video. make sure you get used to defending things thinly and only playing against what you can see, and you're going to find your own skill level is going to shoot up. Because again, you can't have, Diamond or Master or GM or pro level gameplay and pro level macro if all you're doing is putting up all these defenses to make sure you don't die to this cheese or you don't die to this. You have to play against what you can see, guys. If you're not doing that, you're in a lot of trouble. And this is the important part about playing against what you can see. There's two ways to look at it. There's what is my opponent potentially doing. So you go scout a Protoss and you see that he's mined a whole bunch of extra gas. Well, there's a few things. It could be a proxy Immortal Bust, or it could be a proxy Oracle. It's okay to defend against the Oracle because that is something that can just kill you outright really, really quickly in the current future, right? So even though you don't see the Oracle, adding that defense is something that you have to do because that can just kill you like instantly, especially if you're not prepared for it, right? I've seen Flash die to that because he's just, he pulls his Marines out and he doesn't add the turret in the back. So that's a little bit different. Or, maybe you're worried about, you feel like you're in a really good position against the Protoss player, you feel like you're in great shape and you're ready to go. What can you die to? Well, the answer is Dark Templar, right? So that's where you would add on that little bit of defense to ensure your victory and make sure you don't lose the game. Now, the other thing is, when you're going out, if you're really scared of something, go out and scout for it, go look for it, right? If you're scared the other guy's going Cloak Banshee, or if you're like, oh man, if this guy attacked right now, I'd be so screwed, like, I don't have any bunkers up, I'm in all kinds of trouble, I have to be really, really careful here. Go look on the map, figure out where the other guy is, figure out what he's doing. It's really easy to just be like, okay, I'm scared of this, so what's the correct reaction? Is it to throw down 3 bunkers? No, it's to go out on the map and look. If you're worried about the Protoss doing a 1-base play, scan his natural, figure out if that is like just a really hard 4-gate or something like that, right? You throw down the scan, you look at his natural, you're like, oh, he still hasn't built his natural, and I've seen quite a few units off him. I better add on a bunch of bunkers in front of mine to make sure that I don't die to this, right? And at that point, that's where you would cut SCVs to get those bunkers up and continue unit production, right? And you'll see pro Terran players do this all the time. They just stop making workers when they know they're ahead economically to get the bunkers up and get the defense up and make sure they're consistently producing units. And then when they get that spare money again, because they've already built all the bunkers, they'll go back into SCV production. You really have to make sure you're looking for stuff and you're ready to go whenever something comes at you. I know this has kind of been a long episode and it's a little bit more of a ranty one, but it's really important that when you play the game, you don't play with fear, you don't play like you're scared of anything, and you just make sure that if you're really worried about something, go out and look for it. And then the second part is, if your opponent can do something that would just straight up kill you because you don't have any defense, like there's very few things that can just kill you, right? A good example would be like Widow Mines. Widow Mines aren't going to straight up kill you if they get dropped in your lines, right? You can pull your drones or your SCVs or whatever away and you'll be okay. But an Oracle, that can kill you because it can kill all your workers nearly instantly, right? Dark Templar, those can kill you. So when you're in a position where you're ahead, you can go ahead and do that kind of stuff and you'll be in great shape as long as you defend against those things. Keep that in mind, guys. Sorry this is a little bit of a ranty episode. Hopefully you guys enjoy the game in the background. And I'll see you guys next time with the next episode. Have a good one, boys.
Additional supply depots required.